Now, the history moment is something a little different this evening. I thought I was going to be doing on Dr. Clark's stories again, but in the last couple of weeks, I work in the archives up in the museum. I came across something that I found interesting, and maybe you would. It deals with the pre-Civil War slavery in Washington County, which is a little different subject, but I'm going to put a little different twist to it. Have each of you ever wondered why Washington County, East Tennessee, was more pro-union during the Civil War? A lot of people credit it with the fact that we didn't have as many slaves. Well, that's not necessarily true. I want to give you a different slant on it. I believe a lot of it goes to what things I have talked to in the past as examples. A lot of it has to do with the faith that we have in our community. That faith goes back for over 200 years. And beginning with, in 1825, we had a Reformation in this county that brought just about every soul in Washington County and Boones Creek community together for a revival that lasted all summer. Out of that, we ended up with all these churches that we have. We had a boom in the faith in the community. Boones Creek Christian Church, 1825, came out of that. As a result of that, the gospel that was preached in this community followed the New Testament teachings. And of course, we all know 1 John chapter 4 deals with God is love. Well, God has shined love on our community. And we, likewise, were told in the commandments to honor two main commandments. Honor God with all your heart, soul, mind, and spirit, and also your neighbor. They took that to heart. And that's part of the basis I'm saying that we have a little different slant on this, because our faith in our community was a big to-do with how we look at the slavery issues in Washington County. It wasn't because we didn't have slaves. In fact, in the Civil War, we had over 100 members of the Boones Creek Christian Church that were blacks. So what caused this? Well, examples I've given in the past is Dr. Hankel, a prominent educator, physician, a healer of faith, started black churches after the Civil War. That was a history moment in and of itself. We also had the Underground Railroad came right through Boones Creek in this area. We also had the first abolitionist newspaper began in the country in Washington County. We've discussed these things, but tonight I want to tell you something else. I came across a case that was Floyd versus Floyd. It was a Tennessee Supreme Court case arising in 1842. In 1842, there was a farmer in Washington County who had slaves. He was a slave owner and had an over 100-acre farm. He was typical of how the families treated their slaves as part of the family. He liked his slaves to the point that in 1842, he did a will, and in his will, he freed his slaves and left his farm to his slaves, to the exclusion of his family. Now, naturally, his family, before they probated the will, they tried to get him to destroy it, didn't do it. Gave it slaves safekeeping. After he died, the slaves took it to the probate court, and even the executors of the will contested it. They not only contested it, but they said that a slave had no rights. They were property. And even if they were freed, they didn't have standing, they didn't have rights until it was actually probated, so they couldn't probate it. That was the executor's stance. The Tennessee Supreme Court reversed that. And I would have you in mind, look, this was 1840s. In 1840s, this is antebellum South, and you know how the slaves were treated in the South. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in Tennessee, based upon the Tennessee Constitution, said, a slave is not in the condition of a horse or an ox. His liberty is restored, it is true, but he is made after the image of his Creator. He has mental capacity and immoral principle in his nature and constitute him equal to the owner, but for the accidental birth that he had the fortune of being placed at birth, he was born as a slave. But this cannot extinguish his high-born nature, nor deprive him of the many rights which are inherent in man. That was in the 1846. And I would point out that it was remanded back to the trial court. They had a trial. The jury upheld the slaves. They were emancipated. They were given the farm. And that was in antebellum South many years before the Civil War. And that was an attitude based upon their faith. And it was a faith why we had such a big difference in this community. And not only that, but I would contrast this to a U.S. Supreme Court case that didn't occur for another 11 years. It was the infamous Dred Scott case. That was a case where they determined that Missouri Compromise, which didn't allow extension of slavery in the community, was void. They said that American black slaves were not American citizens. They had no rights. This was the U.S. Supreme Court based upon the United States Constitution 11 years after what Tennessee did. So that was a decision in 1857 that was the impetus that led to the Civil War. So I would like each of you to reevaluate yourself and think about our faith in this community is something that's strong and been that way for over 200 years. And it doesn't only occur back before the Civil War, it continues today. Look at what God has done for us and look at the faithfulness of the bountiful plenty he's given to our farms, and look what he's given us next door that's going up. So I would say give thanks to our Creator and thank him for allowing his love as the Lord's Supper, the Lord's Prayer says, he gives us our daily bread. That daily bread is not just food, it's the love he gives, and he wants us to share it with others. This community has done that for over 200 years. Let's continue to do that. And that's my history moment.